We're gonna start with Jessica.
Yes.
They're the ones who provided you with the delicious cookies. Randy.
Yeah,
that's
thank you.
fine.
Maybe. Okay, yep, here we go.
Perfect.
Okay, and I wanna say, nope, it's not that one. Okay, yes, it's this top one if you want to point her.
Okay, and then just this one to move it?
Yes, it should be.
Okay,
If not, I'll come back.
Thank you so much. You were well.
and I'll let Casey hand this out. Got a little information about all of our companies. I work for Davidson Oil. And we are under the Davidson Teal umbrella, and we have several different companies. I'm primarily just going to talk to you about Davidson Oil, but I'll kind of touch on the rest. And Casey works for Wilburn, and she has put some information about Wilburn in there as well. Well,
Did it not go?
nope,
I have to use that.
that's fine.
Maybe just use the arrow. Okay. Or not.
Do I? Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Okay, I thought it was.
okay.
Paper towel, I think.
Well, now it'll work, kind of. Okay, now you try. Oh, of course. How does it do that? I just got it to move a second ago. You have to click like right here.
Okay.
On the side. Okay.
Okay, so we're a fuel company, originally founded in 1974 in Amarillo, so we're local, family owned. We've got several areas of operation: Albuquerque, Amarillo, Big Spring, El Paso, Lubbock, Midland, Odessa, and San Antonio. We not only have fuel trucks, but we also provide different equipment. In for our bobtail, which we only have in Lubbock and in Amarillo. Amarillo, we've got 2 bobtail trucks, 8 Flying Star company owned tractor trailers, and those all are full transport loads. And then we've got an owner operator that also helps out. In Lubbock, we have a bobtail truck and a tank wagon. And then we've got 7 Flying Star company owned tractor trailers. Flying Star is our transport company that is also owned by the same people. They decided we were having a hard time getting people to haul fuel for us. And so I believe in the early 2000s is when Flying Star was established by the same people. We've got a lot of different options for tanks. You guys may all have tanks already. You may have transport size tanks, which is of course where the biggest price break is. But if you just need smaller tanks where you're looking to, be able to purchase dyed diesel, so you're not having to pay tax on it, or you don't want to have to send somebody, to the store to try to get gas to fill the tractor, or, whatever you might need it for. We do have tanks available for lease or purchase. We've got your overhead tanks that are gravity fed with a hose and nozzle. We've got skid tanks. The ones we have for lease are 500, 1,000, and 2,000 gallons. Anything under 1,100 gallons is not, it's not, the TCEQ does not require containment, so it can't just be a single wall. Anything over 1,100 gallons is regulated, and so it has to be in containment. Anything bigger than that would be, you would have to purchase it, which is where then Casey would step in. On the ones for lease, we do have some with 12-volt pumps. If you want to run it off a battery, if you've got electric, you can feed it into, we have those as well. Some that, you just drive up and you've got a hose and nozzle. And we have the options to monitor if that is something that you're interested. I know around here, there's a possibility it could come from Amarillo or Lubbock. But because we do have different locations, we do have the ability to provide service in multiple locations at once. In 2008, it's when our bobtail division started. At that time, there was need to fuel the occasional generator or piece of equipment, but typically we were only fueling tanks. But in 2019, we began a full-time mobile fueling operation in Amarillo and Lubbock. So we also will just fuel fleets, or if you have equipment that needs, if you've got a forklift, something that you need filled up, you don't want to go to the station and get, you know, a gas can and you don't want to drive it, we can do that as well. In those two areas, we are fueling Amazon, FedEx, Southeastern, Coca-Cola, different ones like that. We also provide fuel for TxDOT in all of this area here. And we have emergency fuel services as well. We do that for Maxer Pharmacies, the City of Amarillo, BSA. So like, you know, when the power goes down because of the terrible winds and then the hospital is concerned, they might call to make sure that they've got fuel in their generator to keep going. This is one of our bobtail trucks. And then of course, just one of your farm tanks or overhead tanks. This is really just if there are times when maybe the racks go down and you need fuel and you're having trouble getting fuel. I know 2021 or 2022, there was the freeze and there was no fuel for a while and everybody was running out. We do have bulk storage in both Amarillo and in Lubbock, and we do have daytime and nighttime drivers to kind of keep everybody filled. I've been with the company for 12 years and it handled most of our bobtail and just a lot of the house accounts that we've had for a long time in the Amarillo and Lubbock areas, as well as some of the others. Christina here has been with us for 4 years. She's our fuel operations manager. And she handles almost all of our bobtail planning and making sure the drivers can handle whatever they need to and get them scheduled. I went back too far. Thomas, our lead bobtail driver, has actually been with us for 15 years, but he's been doing this for 31 years. So we've got drivers with experience. We've got tenured drivers. It's a pretty good family-owned company and people stick around for a while. And this is just contact information. If it is something that you guys are interested, there's contact information in there. Rain or shine, or, you know, unless it's not safe, then our drivers are out there delivering, but safety is a big priority. So I told you we've got several different companies. Davidson Oil is our fuel company. We do provide fuel, not only, you know, to different agriculture services, also for some retail as well. We haul fuel sometimes for United, for Hackensack, Circle K, several others. So you may have seen our Flying Star trucks in the area. And then we have Wilburn, who handles our equipment and service. They are installing fuel systems. They are, I don't know if you want to touch on that anymore. Building, you know, they will build tanks, kind of get you set up. If you want to start from fresh and you think, we're going to save a lot of money because there is a huge price break if you've got a full transport size tank at your house. Of course, you'd have to look at a return on investment calculator to see when you would break even, but you absolutely would. And in the long run, it's a good savings and you don't have to worry about getting somebody to the store. We also have Skyrite. It's a sign company if you guys ever find yourself in the need for a sign anywhere. And then we have ACT, Advanced Compliance and Testing, and they actually go out and test the lines and make sure that it is up to TCEQ standards if you have something in that area. And that is all that I've got about the companies. And I think I put a flyer in there for each one of them that probably explains it in a little more detail. I didn't want to just stand up here and bore you to death with different facts, but you might find something in there that you need that we could supply. The biggest part of it is depending on what you're needing. You kind of make the decision about what works best. If you're needing savings, then the large 8,000 or over tanks are the way, you know, they're the way to go. And if you just don't have time and you don't want to be sending somebody back and forth and you want the tax break on dyed diesel, then the smaller tanks might be something that would be beneficial to you. So, yes.
The first slide, was that your different terminal locations?
Yes,
Okay, so do y'all offer like a service of like, if you're a customer or whatever, do you send out like daily bids?
we do.
Okay.
Yeah, so we send out a daily bid every night. The market is closed over the weekends. The one that goes out Friday night is good until Monday. And then we also have we send out daily market updates twice a day. So you get an email. We were getting text, but it looks like that service is down right now. So, but you can sign up and you don't have to be a customer. You can actually go to davidsonoil.com and click on there and it says sign up for market alerts. And so it tells you, here's what the market's doing. So if you're looking like, when should I purchase? You can kind of see if it's headed up the next day, it might not be a good date. If it's headed down 5 cents, you might want to call and say, can you get me on the books? So. Anything else? For me or for?
And if you, the only thing I have to add is if you already have your fueling system in place and say you have a pump that goes out or something like that, we visit a lot of co-ops, a lot of individual farms, and we can have somebody come out and look and see if it's something that we can repair or if it's something that needs to be purchased. We are an authorized dealer and we get better pricing on a lot of things. So we do a lot of those visits, not just think like, oh, I gotta trash this piece of equipment. We may be able to fix it. So you can always have a service call, Act and Appliance. I mean, we have that as well, just to keep everything in regulation, but, we have fill rack pumps, we have everything.
And then we do have a storefront in Amarillo as well. If you actually just needed to come in and I actually brought something to send home with her. So I just grab a flow gauge, but if there's something that you need, we do sell pumps and we do sell hoses and filters and there is a storefront. I know that that's a ways to drive, but I know some of you are from other areas also. So we have that as well in downtown Amarillo. So.
Do a lot of you already have your own fueling systems? Yeah. Everybody? Yeah. Do you have large tanks? Most of you? You're like, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you provide, I mean, do you have, like monitoring systems, like, you know, that different guys using, being able to keep up with who uses what?
Oh, we do, yeah, like a PB 200.
Yes.
So there are different systems they can put in there with a pin pad, or they might, I think some of them have actual key cards and it tracks who's getting it and it's a way to keep it
Yeah,
secure.
but we even have a system now as technology advances. It's on your mobile phone. And so say you get crossways with somebody and you don't want them to have access to fuel for that day. You can immediately cut that off. Immediately. Somebody doesn't pay their bill, like you can immediately cut that off. Or if you get a new employee and I need to give them access. And then you can give them access. And so a lot of things are going mobile now. We still do have the card readers and the keypads. You can either do a key in code or you can have a card. Some of them have little toggles that you can use. But yeah, those little card towers are good.
And while you're talking about everything going mobile, we also do have an app for ordering fuel and checking your invoices and watching the market and going from there.
Yeah.
So. And it's local, and we've got an office in Lubbock as well. We don't have like the storefront in Lubbock, but we do have a Wilburn team in Lubbock, and then we've got a Flying Star terminal where our drivers are, and we do serve some of the gens and co-ops in the areas as well. Quite a few different customers. Lowe's grocery store is a big customer of ours. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
And thank you for the sweets.
I'm excited to be here. Dee Dee told me to cover whatever I wanted. And so that's what my slideshow is called, whatever you want to cover. And so I put together a list of different topics, but truthfully, we can kind of pick and choose. If there are things I don't have that you guys want to talk about, I'm more than glad to scrap all this and just talk. So let me know, we can certainly do that. We'll see how far we get. We may get through it, we may not, it doesn't matter to me. Anytime I speak at a Women in Ag program, I always start out and tell you why I always make it my mission to say yes to any Women in Ag program. And that's because of my grand. Growing up, my grand was like, if you don't talk about the idea of Annie's project, my grand was that. So she and my grandpa brought our farm in New Mexico, not far from where Lisa's parents have their place in the 50s. Bought this farm. She and my grandfather were both teachers in town, farmed on the side, and everything was great. And then one day, my grandpa dropped dead of a heart attack at 45 years old. Left my mom with a job in town, 2 teenage sons to raise, and a farm to run. And everybody told her the best thing she could do was just to sell the farm. And she didn't, and she put her head down and she went to work, and my parents are still on that farm. I grew up on that farm, and my kids are the 4th generation that are there now. And so, Annie's project means a lot to me. I wore one of my grandma's rings today. After she had taught elementary school for 35 years, she retired. And that day she went to the jewelry store in town and bought herself this diamond ring as her reward for 35 years on the playground, she said. So I ended up with that, but it means a lot to me. So because of our family's experience and my grand, I always try to say yes to any sort of women in ag program, kind of as a way to honor her. And so I'm thrilled to be here with you guys today to chat through some different topics. I have to give you a disclaimer. It says I'm a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. If you have questions, I'm sure glad to answer them. I can't give you specific legal advice. So I can't review documents, can't draft things. I can sure give you names of folks that can help you do that. I just can't do it for you. Texas A&M says that's a conflict of interest. I can't do that. So, but if anybody does need recommendations at some point, get with me. Sure glad to offer those to you. Here's a list of what I put together. Like I say, if there's something that's really sparking your interest, we'll make sure we cover it. So let me know. I'm going to start off with just some ag law resources that might be useful. Then I'm going to talk about Texas landowner liability statutes. Those are laws that protect you if somebody gets injured on your property. I think all of us probably should be concerned about that. And this is some pretty practical pointers for you about those laws. I have some information about estate planning documents because Dee Dee asked me to hit on that. But I know you had Jason Johnson here, and I don't know how much he talked about estate planning documents. So when we get there, if we've already covered it, tell me and we'll just skip through that section. Easements is another thing I think real important to talk about. I've got some slides on that. And then I just call it other hot topics. That's going to be more like current event type things that are going on. So we can sure cover whatever we want. Okay, I'm going to leave us at least 15 or 20 minutes at the end to make sure if you guys have questions about things we did not cover, we have time to cover. So if you came with other issues, don't be limited here. We can talk about anything. Okay. Okay, so a couple of resources. I've got a handbook that I think is pretty useful. It's called Owning Your Piece of Texas. And essentially it's a handbook we put together of key laws for Texas landowners. We wrote it for landowners, not for lawyers, okay? So it's not, I unlegal eased it as much as I could, okay? That's available, it's for free. You can get a PDF on my website, or if you wanna buy a hard copy, we have those for sale as well. We do offer live courses sometimes, and we've got an online course. It's about an 8-hour version teaching through the book. It's 8 hours of me, it's a lot. But we walk through all the chapters in the book and teach through that. So those are,
and it's easy to read.
yeah, we really worked hard. We worked hard to make it readable for folks. And it's available for free on my website, which is going to be on the next slide. I do have a blog. It's called the Texas Agriculture Law Blog. Essentially, that's just the landing page for everything I create. So if I write a handbook or a checklist, it gets posted there. If I do a summary of a case, if there's a new law that gets passed in Texas, it lands here. And so if anybody's interested, you can just look for Texas Agriculture Law Blog or the QR code on your paper. You can scan that as well. Okay, everything on there too is available for free. So if you want PDF of anything I've ever written, it's free there. You can just grab it. I also have a podcast. I heard some of y'all talking about podcasts. So we have podcast listeners in the room. Lots of times I'm in rooms with men who are approximately 75. Right, and they're all in their plaid shirts and they've never heard the word podcast. And I'm like, you can listen to my podcast. And they're like, huh? So if you're a podcast listener, we're on all your apps. Just look for Ag Law in the Fields. And it's just audio interviews I do with ag lawyers from around the country on all different topics. If you don't know what a podcast app is or a podcast, that's okay. That website right there is going to bring you just a list of the interviews. All you have to do is pick the one you want to listen to and press play on your phone or your computer. We are almost at 200 episodes. So as you can imagine, we have covered the gamut of topics. Lots of information on a number of different things. One that I'll plug because it's the time of year, you're gonna be getting your notices of appraised value pretty soon in the mail from the appraisal district. Everybody loves that when that shows up, right? We just did a podcast, a two-parter on how to protest your property taxes. Super practical, super useful. I used our little tactics last year to kind of test it, and I got them to lower my property taxes to lower than I even asked for. So I'm just telling you, we have good tips. That are available. Lots of stuff on estate planning. We've got stuff on fence law and water law and landowner liability. It's all available on that app. And again, you can listen to it. So those are just some of the resources that we've got. Let's jump into these limited liability statutes. Like I say, essentially there are 3 statutes in Texas that protect rural landowners if somebody gets injured on your property. It's essentially the Texas legislature trying to encourage us to open up our property by limiting our liability when somebody gets injured. So great laws. The kicker is you got to know about them and make sure you've taken the steps for them to apply before somebody gets injured. Right? If somebody calls me after somebody's already been injured, there's nothing I can do to help them make these statutes apply, right? So good thing to know about ahead of time. We'll walk through all 3. For most operations, all 3 can apply to you. And you probably want to make sure all 3 do apply, and here's the reason. You don't know how the injury is exactly gonna occur, right? And so what if you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna make sure that the recreational use statute applies to my operation. But somehow the injury, how it happened, it doesn't fit under the recreational use statute. But it would have fit under the Agritourism Act had you done that protection. So you want to make sure you've got all 3 protections if you can. Okay, so we'll start off with the Texas Recreational Use Statute. Actually, hang on, I'm already in sidetrack. Before we get to that, everybody needs to have liability insurance. Have we talked about that in here yet? Okay, if you own land or if you're leasing ag land, you've got to have liability insurance. Okay, twofold reason. One of them, as you know, right, if somebody gets injured on your land, then the insurance company will pay up to the policy limits on a covered claim. That's important. But don't overlook the second benefit of liability insurance is that if somebody gets injured, the insurance company has a duty to defend you. What that means is somebody gets hurt on our ranch, my first phone call is to the insurance company. They hire me a lawyer on their dime to represent me in that lawsuit.
And they do a good job.
And they do a good job, she says. Theoretically, typically, right, but they should. Most insurance defense lawyers are good. That's a lot of what they do. I did some of that in a former life before I took this gig. They can be really good. Okay, the trick is you want them to pay for it. Because here's the deal, we're gonna talk a whole bunch here about how you can make sure you're not liable, right? And don't worry, you won't be liable. There's a difference between being liable and being sued. And if you're a landowner, the odds of you being sued if something happens regarding your property are extremely high. And the reason for that is plaintiffs' lawyers are looking for any defendants with deep pockets. Who has deep pockets? People who own land because they have an asset, right? That's worth a lot of money. So even if you're not going to be liable, even if we're going to do everything right and have all the signs and everything, you still need to have that liability insurance to get you out of the lawsuit. Because it could cost you $20,000, $30,000 just to get yourself dismissed out of a suit you never should have been, right? So really recommend liability insurance. Who you buy it from, I don't care. Okay, just make sure you have it. Make sure it covers all of your properties. Okay, what you don't want to have is a situation where, especially if you're leasing land, make sure your leased properties are also covered on your liability insurance. To add a property should be minuscule amounts of dollars. Okay, how much coverage you have depends on what you're doing, right? So I think about like, we've got a place that we lease, we keep cows there. There's no hunters, there's no recreational activity, it's not by a county road. I have liability insurance, but I don't have a lot because my risk is just pretty low. Compare that to like a pumpkin patch, right? Talk about a place I have no fun to take. on a trip, it's me to a pumpkin patch. I'm just like liability issues everywhere I go, right? The pumpkin patch needs a whole bunch of liability insurance, right? Because what could go wrong? Like we're opening up to the public, and small kids and vines and bugs and sharp objects, right? They need a lot more insurance than me. Okay, if I was gonna tell you the standard farm and ranch policy, I'd tell you $1 million. You probably need to have $1 million farm and ranch policy, standard. If you're doing stuff that's extra risky, you probably need to ratchet that up a little bit. Okay, the other thing I'll tell you on pricing liability insurance, shouldn't be that expensive. Now you may think, I saw my insurance bill, and if you're like me, it like quadrupled in the last 5 years. Anybody else notice that? It's the property coverage that's so expensive. If you look at the breakdown, the liability coverage is cheap. So we've got that place I told you before, we've got $500,000 of coverage on a section of land. Okay, anybody want to guess what I paid per year for that? $500,000? $120. I'm thrilled to write a $120 check to have $500,000 in coverage and a lawyer on speed dial, right? It's just silly not to have it. The other thing I tell you is price a level up. So if you call and you price, a $500,000 policy, price $1 million. Sometimes it's like $20 difference. You know what I mean? It's silly, the cheap cost of getting double the coverage. Okay, so check that. So liability insurance is a must-have for everybody from a liability protection standpoint. Okay, now we'll talk about the statutes. The first one we're going to hit on is the recreational use statute. If you're going to have any sort of recreational users, hunting, fishing, hiking, picnicking, ATVs. Okay, I got a whole list. I'll give you more examples. But if you're going to have people doing that, make sure this statute applies to you. It's a very, very strong protection. Okay, we're going to walk through how it works. It's the Civil Practice and Remedies Code, Chapter 75. And here's what it says. Basically, it says a landowner, lessee, or occupier of land. So this can apply even on your leased land too. Okay, a landowner, lessee, or occupier of land is liable only for intentional acts or gross negligence if the statutory requirements apply. What that means is, let's say somebody gets injured. The normal lawsuit in an injury case is they sue you for negligence. It's a fairly low bar for them to prove, okay? Fairly easy for a person to win. Under this statute, they can't sue you for negligence. They can only sue you for gross negligence or intentional acts. Those are very hard to prove, okay? Gross negligence has to be something extremely egregious. Like, you have to show conscious disregard for human life. It's hard for a plaintiff to prove gross negligence. And if they can't prove that, they can't sue you. Their lawsuit's going to get dismissed, you're going to win. So this is a very good statute for Texas landowners. For it to apply to you, you got to have three things. You got to have land. We'll talk about that in a minute. Just hang with me. Land. The plaintiff has to be there for a recreational purpose, and you've got to meet one of the three monetary requirements we're going to talk about. Okay? So those three things. We're going to walk through each one. So the first thing is you got to have land. Pieces of this statute apply to non-agricultural land. Like if you got a big backyard in town or something, we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to focus on ag land, okay? And for the purposes of this statute, agricultural land is Texas land that is suitable for growing crops, forestry, raising livestock. It says suitable for. Doesn't say you have to be doing it. And it doesn't matter what the appraisal district says. Okay, so what rural land is not suitable for a goat? Very little rural land, right? So this is pretty broad. It applies a lot. Like I said, we're going to skip the next part that talks about non-ag land. But as long as you've got land that is suitable for one of these things, you've met the first requirement of the statute. Okay. The second requirement of the statute is the plaintiff had to be injured during a recreational activity. Here's the list. Hunting, fishing, swimming, boating, camping, picnicking, hiking, pleasure driving, that includes ATVs, nature study, cave exploration, water skiing, biking, disc golf, walking dogs, radio control flying, and any other activity associated with enjoying nature or the outdoors. Pretty dadgum broad, right? So almost anything you are doing is gonna count here. The one place I've seen courts limit this, anybody have a wedding venue, like a wedding barn on the property? Courts have said attending an outdoor wedding is not a recreational activity. I'd say they haven't been to some of the weddings either, but fine. Okay, so, and it depends on what the plaintiff was doing when they got injured. Okay, so I get this question sometimes. They'll say, well, I'm gonna put an Airbnb or like a cabin for people to Airbnb on my rural property. Does the statute apply? It depends on how they got injured. If they're outside hiking when they got injured, yes, the statute applies. If they slip and fall in the shower in the house, no such luck. Does that make sense? So it depends on what they're doing. Okay, so ag land, the plaintiff is injured during a recreational activity. That's check mark number 2. And then for number 3, you're gonna have to meet one of the requirements on this slide. Only one, not all. The first option is if you don't charge a fee. Okay, so if I let somebody come hunt on my ranch for free, the recreational use statute automatically applies. And I am only liable for intentional acts or gross negligence. So if you have husbands like mine who refuse to do the dang paperwork I asked for of the hunters, right? I have a lease, I have a release, I have all the stuff because I'm scared, right? My husband's like, I don't need that, let's just go, we'll just sleep in. The reason I can sleep at night is because of this statute, right? Him and his buddy go hunting, it's fine. I'm only liable for intentional acts or gross negligence. Okay, so that's a pretty good option. But some of us are trying to make a living, right? So we've got to charge some money for some of this. So here's the next option. The total charges collected over the past calendar year are not more than 20 times the ad valorem taxes imposed on the property for the previous calendar year. In English, what that says, okay, is you're gonna get a column and add up any income you made from recreational users last year. Anybody who paid to hunt, fish, hike, whatever, get a total income. Then in another column, you're gonna add up all the property taxes you paid anywhere in Texas. Not just the ranch, the fancy house in town can count too. Get a total. So long as the income is not more than 20 times the taxes, the statute applies. Almost everybody fits here. You gotta make a lot of money for that not to work, okay? Or here's your third option. You can scrap all this worry about money and look at this. If you have liability insurance coverage of at least 500,000 per person, $1 million per occurrence, and 100,000 for property damage. If you have $1 million insurance policy, the statute automatically applies. We don't care how much you charge. And let me give you an added bonus. For agricultural land, if someone sues, your liability is capped at your insurance coverage amount, at the $1 million. So let's say somebody gets killed on a hunting accident on my property. They sue me for $5 million. That would be a reasonable claim if someone gets killed on the property. Even if they sue me and they win, they can't recover more than $1 million because this statute says I have that cap if I have that insurance coverage on agricultural land. Okay, so I told you, I don't know how much insurance you need necessarily. If you're gonna have recreational users, I'd have $1 million because of that cap. Okay, that's the whole statute. There's no paperwork, there's no waivers, there's no signs, there's no exceptions. It just automatically applies. Super good protection for ag landowners. Any questions on that?
They can't go through, they can't go past the insurance company to the landowner. I mean, it stops there.
This would stop here. Yes, under this statute, as long as it's applied. That's right. Yep. And that's the benefit, right? So without the cap, let's say they sue you for $5 million and get it. Well, they're coming for you for 4 million, right? Here, it's capped at $1 million. You'd have to pay your deductible.
Okay.
Fine. At that point, like take it, right? But yes, that's the beauty of the cap. Yep. Okay, that's recreational use statute. Next statute, let's talk about the Agritourism Act. There's my kids at that pumpkin patch where I like had the hot heebie-jeebies about it all. The Agritourism Act, it's gonna overlap some with the recreational use statute. So there are certain situations where both could be a defense, but there's some differences. So we're gonna walk through them, okay? The other thing I'll tell you about the Agritourism Act is it's still fairly new. It was passed in 2016. There are no reported cases on it. So on the recreational use statute, I can give you lots of examples of how that's applied. I can't do that here because there just hadn't been any yet. Okay, so I can tell you what it says, but that's about all. Okay. So the idea of the Agritourism Act is we want to encourage people to open up their properties for agritourism. And so what it says is agritourism entities are not liable if the plaintiff is there for a recreational or educational purpose and you hang up a sign or get them to sign a release. So you can see some differences already, right? The first one is the purpose. Plaintiff is there for a recreational, that's the same, or educational purpose. So let's say Christy wants to have a field day, right? Blaine's gonna look at his bugs or whatever he does out there, right? And they wanna come to your field. Is that recreational? Maybe, right? Maybe that's enjoying nature and the outdoors, but it's for sure educational, right? And so we know this statute's gonna apply because it's got that broader scope, okay? You do have to hang up this sign or get a release. We'll talk through those. So there's an extra step to take, okay? There's some definitions here. I won't bore you with all the details. I'll just tell you that because of how these definitions are written, this applies to your farm and ranch. It doesn't have to be like an agritourism business like a pumpkin patch or a corn maze. Applies to any agricultural land in Texas. And again, agricultural land is land that's suitable for growing crops, raising livestock. Okay, and the recreational use definition is the same one as that last statute. So we get our two real broad definitions plus educational uses. Okay, but to get the protection, you're going to have to either hang up the sign or have them sign a waiver. Okay, here's the sign. Must be posted in an area clearly visible on or near the premises where the activity is conducted. That's the language. I copied and pasted it right from the statute. You can make your own sign. Lots of folks sell them. Farm Bureau has them. Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers has them. Sheep and Goat Raisers, Texas Wildlife. Okay, lots of people will sell them. Our crop insurance agent did them for Christmas gifts one year. Genius marketing, right? And her logo's right on it, so that was smart. But you want to get that and hang it up. Most people hang them on the front gate. Like we have hunters, so we put ours on the front gate. That's where we have it hung. Okay, so you can either hang up the sign or you can have your people sign an Agritourism Act release. The release has to be signed before the activity by the participant or their parent, guardian, or managing conservator. It needs to be separate than any agreement other than another waiver of liability. So this can't be in your hunting lease. It can be in just a standard liability waiver. Okay, and you got to print it at least 10-point bold font. The legislature thought that was important. I don't know. Okay, again, copied and pasted right from the statute. We print this out, have our hunters sign it. Okay, you can do the sign or the waiver. I'm like a belt and suspenders kind of girl, so I do both. Okay, I like things about both. I like the sign because if I miss getting somebody a waiver, or if my husband doesn't have them sign the stupid waiver, the sign's hung up and I'm covered, right? The one place I like the release better is if you're gonna have minor children on the property. Anybody have hunters who bring kids? Or you let the 4-H club come or the Girl Scouts, right? Any of those things? Texas law is not clear on whether a parent can waive liability for a minor. We have parents do this all the time, right? The school has me sign a release a week, it feels like. None of those, we don't know if any of those are enforceable. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. The Supreme Court's never told us. But this statute right here, the legislature specifically said, point number 2 is in italic. This waiver can be signed by the parent, guardian, or managing conservator. This is your best bet to enforce a liability waiver against a minor child. If I was going to have anybody under 18 on the property, I would have them sign this. And people will say, well, what if we're going to send the schools coming out? The schools bringing all the kids. Before they get off the bus, right? They have them send the waivers home, make the school collect those, and you have them before the kids crawl off the bus. I think that's your safest bet if there's an injured kid. Okay. Questions on this? Who has nightmares about letting anybody on your property now? Anybody feel nervous? I feel like I do. Yeah, this lady's like, lock the gate. Okay. There-
Kindergarten class is gonna take a field trip to my house and I'm like.
Waivers, you're good to go. Look at good timing. This is great. Yeah. There are, not just gonna panic, don't panic. There are some exceptions to the statute, but we're not gonna go through these because there's no case law on them yet. So we'll let the lawyers find it out. You want to argue that the Agritourism Act protection. Okay. Perfect. So I would do the waiver too. For the kindergarten bus, you want the waiver. Okay. Oh, this question comes up sometimes when we're talking about liability. People will say, well, what about snakes? What if the kindergartners come out and somebody gets bit by a snake? Am I liable for that? Do I have to warn people about that? How does that work? The answer is subject to two real wonky exceptions. Landowners are not liable for wild animals on their property. That's things like snakes, scorpions, wasps, stuff like that, not liable. The two exceptions. One of them is if you brought the snake in from somewhere else to the property. You could be liable. Y'all know somebody had to do this for me to know it's the law. Yeah, okay. Like homegrown snakes, no problem, but don't be importing, okay? The other one is if you reduce the snake to your possession, you can be liable. So I don't know.
Capture
You capture the snake, keep it in your yard, you can be liable. Free range snakes are cool. So, I'm not losing much sleep over the snakes, but that can make everybody feel a little bit better. Okay, so that's the Texas Agritourism Act. Okay, the third statute is the Texas Farm Animal Liability Act. Anybody who has livestock, farm animals, I'll give you a definition in a minute, needs to make sure this statute applies to you because it's a good protection. Okay, and the Farm Animal Liability Act, here's the idea. The legislature basically said, we understand that there are certain inherent risks to farm animal activities. In other words, no matter what you do, right or wrong, there are things that can go wrong and somebody gets hurt. We don't want farm animal owners to be liable for injuries from those inherent risks, right? So like, if somebody crawls on a horse, even if they do everything right, even if it's Trevor Brazil on a kid horse, someone can go crazy and he gets hurt, right? Those are the risks we don't want owners liable for. So we'll talk through this statute, okay? Look at this pony. We're going to talk about her in a minute. Okay, we'll come back to the pony. All right. So here's the definition of farm animal. It's pretty much what you would think: equine, bovine, sheep, goat, pig, all these birds. And then honeybees kept in a managed colony. That was added in 2021. So if you're a honeybee keeper, this is good for you because now you can get the protections as well. Okay. So that is the definition. What's not covered here, llamas. I've had questions about llamas. I've had questions about livestock guardian dogs, like the dogs that are protecting the sheep. Sheep are covered, dogs are not. Okay, but pretty broad. So if you own any of these animals, you need to hang up the signs. Is what I'm going to tell you. That's the takeaway from this part. The next definition that matters is what is a farm animal activity. I'm going to show you this. Super broad. There's a lot of italic. Let me explain why they had to change this law in 2021. Prior to this, the statute, just said you're not liable for inherent risks of farm animal activities. And then a case came to the Texas Supreme Court called Zunga versus somebody, Rodriguez, I think. And the case was this: guy owns a ranch in Central Texas, has an employee who works for him. Employees goes out to the barn to move a bull, a cow, and a calf. Going to move them to a different pasture. Owner goes to town to run some errands, comes home, finds his employee dead in the corral. The autopsy shows he had been likely attacked by one of the cow, the bull, whatever, and he's dead. His family sues the ranch owner for negligent trading, negligent hiring, I think it's general negligence too. Okay, the ranch owner raises the Farm Animal Liability Act as a defense. He says, hey, inherent risk that when you're moving cattle, this can happen. I'm not liable. And the Texas Supreme Court issued a really shocking ruling that said, we think that the Farm Animal Liability Act was never intended to protect working ranches. We think it was for things like trail rides and rodeos and horse shows. And so immediately the Texas legislature, the next session, went in and fixed it. And they added all this italic language to make clear this applies to any activity on your working ranch, okay? So I'm not allowed to say this, but good job, legislature, for fixing that problem, okay? So, it applies to inherent risks, that's anything involving an animal, it applies. This is new as of 2021, you gotta hang up a sign. Hang it at or near your stable, corral, or arena. It needs to be in any contracts for services related to your farm animals. If you're in riding lessons, it's gotta be in your contract. Here's your language, same group, sell the signs, okay? Hang them up if you've got farm animals on the property. Super good protection. And it applies, the law also made clear, it applies not only to like guests, it also applies if you have employees or independent contractors who get injured. So you got people coming over to help day work, this protects you if they get injured. Okay, really important statute if you've got farm animals. Okay, there are some exceptions I want to walk us through. There's one in particular that's problematic. Okay, here's the exception. So here's how this works. Somebody gets injured with a farm animal, they sue. The Farm Animal Liability Act is the first defense going to be raised by the farm owner, right? They say, dismiss the case. This act says I'm not liable. If then the plaintiff can prove one of the exceptions applies, the case can go forward, right? Because if the exception applies, the defense is out. That's how that works. So there's an exception if the injury was caused by faulty equipment or tack provided by the defendant who knew or should have known it was faulty. That's fine. If you give somebody like a saddle with a busted cinch and you knew it was busted, you probably should be liable. Okay, so that one, that's bothering me. Here's the one that makes me feel a little sweaty. If the defendant provided an animal to the person and did not make a reasonable and prudent effort to determine the ability of the participant to safely engage in the activity and safely manage the animal. Right? What that says to me is before I stick somebody on a horse or on the end of a steer halter, I better ask some questions, right? I better see what their experience is like. I better know everybody thinks they're a better cowboy than they actually are, okay? Because that exception could bite somebody. There's an exception if there's like hidden dangerous conditions on the land that you knew about, horse trips in a hole that you didn't tell them, you knew it was there, that kind of thing. Willful and wanton activities, if you intentionally cause the injury. Okay, so lots there, but really that one is one that's concerning to me. Two more stories. Okay, one of them I'm going to tell you is this. There was a case in Waco, it was the Waco Court of Appeals, Central Texas. We've got one family owns a ranch. Family number 2 comes over to visit for the weekend. Men have worked cattle all day. They have a bunch of horses tied up on the fence at the barn. 6-year-old kid from the visiting family wants to ride a horse. They pull 2 horses off the fence, stick this kid on one, another kid on the other, tell them ride to the end of the road, turn around and come back. Fine, kids ride to the end of the road, they turn around to come back. All these other horses are tied at the barn. Guess what happens? Barn sour horse, here we go, right? Kid falls off, breaks his arm, and that family sues the other family. So first lesson is your friends will sue you, okay? I had a guy one time at a program who was just shocked. He was like, you mean their friends sued them? I said, absolutely, I mean their friends. Okay? And so they sued for negligence. The owner of the horse, the ranch owner, what did they say was their defense? Farm Animal Liability Act, man, inherent risk, you crawl on that horse, you fall off, right? And then the parents of the injured kid said, well, that exception applies. You put that kid on the horse without an inquiry into his ability to safely engage in the activity and safely manage the animal. So let's decide, what do we think? Does the exception apply or not? If the exception applies, the case goes to a jury. Do we think that they failed to do an inquiry into this kid's ability to ride the horse?
Wouldn't that be on the parents?
I think that's the key to the case.
Yeah.
Mom was standing there when they put the kid on the horse and she didn't say anything.
Right.
Okay, and also came out in depositions, this kid also is from a ranch and he had his own horse. Okay, so the court dismissed the case, the Waco Court of Appeals dismissed, but it was a 2-1, wasn't a slam dunk. And I think if you change the facts, I think if we got a kid from town and mom is not standing there, I think we're headed to a jury. Okay,
If you ask me, you're just gonna just know that you might fall off the horse if you get on, no matter who you are. and what-
exactly, yep. So I always tell people this is a really good defense. It's not a silver bullet, right? And that's why we have liability insurance. To help represent us in this lawsuit. Okay, the other thing I'll tell you, I don't have the picture. Usually I put up a picture of my daughter Harper's second birthday party. And that pony I showed you at the beginning is out in the backyard and there's kids all around. And that birthday party was the week after that case came out. And I'm like deposing the kids before they get on the car. You read a horse? Can you say horse? You have to stop. So, anyway, it's hard to be married to a lawyer. Okay, any questions on liability or statutes or any of that?
I know it's mostly Texas, but even would this be the same in like?
So every state is different. Most states have the same statute. Let me back up. Most states have these three kinds of statutes, but they all differ in details. Texas's are some of the best. Most states are not that good. New Mexico's a crest. Yes. I would guess Utah probably not as good.
It's not because my husband's family is not.
Mhm.
And so everyone's come out and do the experience and how they can and how they have all this,
Yes.
And so I'm like, okay, we really need to do something because we're a part of that. And I'm like,
Yeah. And so there's a website, there's the National Ag Law Center has, they call 50 state compilations of all these laws. You just click on Utah and it'll pop you up the laws. Check out those three, because I know that they have at least the farm animal liability. I bet they have the other ones too. But they differ about how they apply and what you have to do. But it'd be worth looking into.
Republicans don't think that.
Yes, they're not gonna like the sign. They won't like the sign.
No, they don't.
Okay, any other questions? We feel good on liability. I mean, maybe not good, but you've at least learned what we can learn. Okay, all right. Estate planning documents. So I'm gonna talk about a few things. How did Jason talk about this when he was here? Things like wills, powers of attorney, that kind of stuff.
A little bit, if you hear it twice, you'll remember with his.
So we'll go again. Okay, so we'll keep rolling. So the first thing, he didn't talk about this because I coined this phrase. I call it a flight plan. Okay, and so I used to call this a death folder. I would tell people, you need to build a death folder. And this little old lady came up to me at a program and she said, honey, you've got to call it a death folder. No one wants to work on that. Call it a flight plan. You like the song, I'll fly away, flight plan. That's what I called it, and now everybody's on board. So good marketing from my little old lady friend. This is gonna be a folder that y'all are gonna put together with all the information somebody would need when you die, or if you are for some reason incapacitated for some amount of time. Gather all this up, have it in one place, and make sure somebody knows where it is. Okay? It sounds simple. This is probably one of the biggest gifts you can give your family. If you've ever had to pick up the pieces after somebody dies suddenly, this would be a great place to start. It could help so much, and it's free. You don't need a lawyer for this. Okay? So let's walk through what needs to be in the flight plan. Your estate planning documents. When somebody dies, the first question you got to know from a legal perspective is, did they have a will or not? Okay, you need to know that. And even if the will was old, right? They made it when they were 18 and they died when they're 85. If they never revoked it and never made another will, that's still a valid will. So have any estate planning documents, powers of attorney, wills, trusts, things like that in the flight plan. Information about any sort of retirement plans you've got, 401ks, IRAs, any sort of investment accounts, right? I think about my dad, he retired last year from his job. I know he has a pension and a retirement account. I have no idea where to find them. Is it at Schwab? Is it at not Schwab? I don't even know the name. Right? Clearly, I'm used to. So what we did, when my parents worked on their flight plan, they pulled the front page off of one of their monthly statements, just stuck it in that flight plan. Now I have the phone number, the name, and the account number if we need to call and track that down. That's, easy, but save some steps. Life insurance policies. They're not going to call to make sure you don't need to collect yet, right? You've got to track those life insurance companies down. So life insurance, cancer insurance, long-term care insurance, anything like that. Make sure you've got that information in the flight plan. Bank account information. This one's important, right? You need a list of your bank accounts, the account number, and while you're doing that, you need to look at how the account is held. I'll explain what that means in just a second, okay? When my grand died, we live in a small town, right? My grand dies, she banked at Citizens Banks where she banked her whole life. We get a phone call from the other bank in town. And they're like, hey, what do you want to do with this account of hers? And I'm like, what? What account? She didn't bank there. She banked at Citizens Bank. Oh no, she had this account and it had like a fairly substantial amount of money in it. We had no idea. Thank goodness, small town America, the bank called us and we were able to get that dealt with. Okay, you need to know how they're held, because when you set up a bank account, you check a little box as to how you want it set up. And one thing you can check is joint account. Another thing you can check is joint account with rights of survivorship. Depending on which box you check dictates what happens when you die, and it is not the same. Okay, so let's say Lisa and I set up a joint account. If I die, my half of that account is gonna be probated and go through my estate, right? Because it was just a joint account when we were alive. My half of that is my half when I die, okay? If we had a joint account with rights of survivorship, when I die, all that bank needs is a death certificate, and bam, Lisa's the full owner of that account. It all goes to her, not through my will/estate, okay? And the problem is, we probably created those accounts forever ago, right? And never paid attention to how we set them up. So check how you have those accounts set up. That can make a big difference, okay? Safety deposit box info, particularly important if you want to keep the flight plan in the safety deposit box, right? Who has access? Do they know where it is? Are they on the signature card of that box? Debt information and pay schedules. This is important for a state plan, but also for a life plan. I don't know how it works at your house, but my house, I'm the one who handles paying the bills. Okay, I had a job with a desk that nominated me. If I got knocked in the head tomorrow and was unconscious for 30 days, my husband has no idea what needs paid, who, when, how much. He's useless. I don't think he knows how to log into the online banking. Okay, so I got a whole sheet in the flight plan that's basically like, if somebody has to step in here, here's what you do, right? Here's who we pay, here's the amount, because they would have no idea. Okay. Copies of your health insurance policies, right? That's a good place to have them if somebody needs to get a hold of your card or whatever. Burial plot location and funeral instructions. If you have strong desires or wishes, make sure that those are in there and tell somebody what those are. If you do any funeral pre-planning, make sure that's in here. That can be a way sometimes if someone's getting older, if you're trying to spin down their accounts, like make them qualify for Medicaid, they'll like prepay for the funeral, but make sure that information's in here. If they did that, somebody needs to know that they took care of that. Email and computer passwords. Don't overlook. You think about how much stuff you have that is password protected on your phone and your computer. You gotta make sure somebody can access that, because otherwise there's data that dies with you. I had a good friend who lost his fiance suddenly. It took him months to get, he just needed in the phone to get phone numbers of people that contact. Couldn't get in, like it was locked down, and Apple's not the most fun to deal with. Okay, so things like that, don't overlook that. Safe combinations. Okay, this was important to me. I thought about this. Guy came up and he said, you got to add safe combinations to your things. I got to know how to get out of the gun safe. And I was like, yeah. And then I thought, wait a minute, where is my own flight plan? In the gun safe. And the whole flight plan is about who takes care of those two little bitty kids. If something happens to me and my husband, we're the only two that can get into the gun safe. Right? So we had to come up with a plan for that. Okay. These are just legal documents you might have. Like when you buy a piece of property, they give you that big folder at the title company. Stick that in the flight plan, because your survey, your deeds, all that stuff is in those folders. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, social security cards, military discharge papers, all these come up when somebody dies. You kind of need to have a list of your assets, okay? And this is really kind of a twofold thing. One of the big things is you need to know the ballpark value of your estate to know if you're going to have an estate tax problem, okay? You don't know that if you don't know what assets you have. So you're going to need to list out, right? The land, the livestock, the equipment. You don't have to like count all the towels in the house, but like big assets, you better know what you have and what they're worth. Kind of keep a running list of that, okay? And we can talk about the estate tax later if y'all want to, but right now the estate tax limit, which means it's an exemption. Basically, if you have an estate value less than this number, I'm going to tell you, you don't owe the estate tax. Right now, it's like $12 million per person. So for a couple, that's $24 million. Unfortunately for me, this is not a problem at my house, okay? But in 2026, that number's set to go down to 5 million a person. And now all of a sudden, we're getting more realistic, right? When we think about the value of a dang cotton stripper in a couple sections of land, bam, we're there. So just pay attention to that and make sure you know if that could be a problem. Crop insurance policies, FSA or NRCS contracts, make sure somebody's aware of that. A list of your business relationships. This seems so simple. And if you've got your son or daughter farming with you, not that big of a deal. But if you've got son or daughter that live in Florida and California, and they have no idea who's the banker, the insurance agent, what elevator they take the grain to, right? Who's the lawyer? Who's the account? They don't know. So a list of that can be super helpful there as well. Okay. So that's the flight plan. Like I say, put it somewhere safe. Make sure somebody knows about it. Okay. Any questions on that? That's good homework. It's a hassle, but it's free. Okay. And it really is worth taking the time to do. Okay. I'm also going to talk to you about 4 documents that everybody needs to have. Now, some of y'all may need more than 4 documents, especially if your estate's kind of complicated, but everybody needs these 4. Okay. First thing is a will. Everybody needs to have a will. I don't care if you're 18 or 85. I don't care if you have a house in town or you have 10,000 acres. You gotta have a will. Okay. And here's why. If you don't have a will and you die, what happens to the majority of your assets, there's some exceptions, the majority of your assets are going to have to go through what's called an intestate probate process. That's this whole process that takes forever. There's a bunch of lawyers involved. They have to investigate who the heirs are, tons of money, tons of time. Then they have to probate the will, and assets are distributed based on a formula that the legislature passed in statute. How many of y'all think that the Texas legislature is the best people to make decisions for where your assets should go? Okay, and a bunch of it's fractional ownership. I'll give you one example. Let's say husband and wife, no will, no kids. Husband dies. Okay, the statute says that all of the husband's joint property goes to the wife. But any of the husband's separate property now goes half to the wife, half to his parents. Which means the wife, let's say that the husband had inherited the land from his grandpa. The wife owns the land jointly now with who? Her mother-in-law. Seem like a good plan? Okay, gotta think through those, right? We don't want those statutes. A will avoids that. Even a simple will. Even if all you did was go home tonight and write down, will of Tiffany, I leave everything to my husband. Sign it. That's a valid will, and you're out of that intestate probate mess. I would tell you, you still need to go to the lawyer and get a really good will done. But when you get there, that gets you out of that. Okay. So in Texas, your will can be handwritten or typed. Can't be verbal. Okay. If you're going to handwrite the will, it has to be completely in your own handwriting. Nothing else, like you can't type part of it. The whole will in your handwriting. If you're going to do a typewritten will, gotta have 2 witnesses see you sign it. They don't have to know what's in it. They just see you sign the will. Okay. Don't make interested people be a witness. At least once a month, there's a case on that where it's like, well, I left everything to daughter A and nothing to daughter B, and so daughter A witnessed the will. Don't do that, right? Like bank tellers make good witnesses. The secretaries at the lawyer's office make good witnesses. Okay, not the kids. Okay, I have this on here. Let's talk about this. Some assets pass by contract outside of the will. So if you have anything where you've designated a beneficiary, that passes outside of the will. So for example, you got a life insurance policy. I forgot to introduce you. I'm so sorry. This is Mary Beth Day. Time out.
Hi.
Mary Beth is our new agricultural economist in District 1. So she's the ag economist for the Panhandle. She started work today. Okay. Okay. Tomorrow, she came with me today, so she didn't go do her paperwork. But tomorrow, she's going to do paperwork and she's going to designate beneficiaries for her life insurance policy. Right? No matter what her will says, those beneficiaries pass through that contractual process. Same with transfer on death accounts. Same with, anything where you designate, beneficiaries, okay? Some like IRAs or 401ks, okay? Don't forget to update the beneficiaries. Let me tell you a story. Case out of Dallas. Guy, goes to work when he's in his 20s at the United States Postal Service. His sign-up package on the second day has life insurance. He names his girlfriend as the beneficiary. You see where this is gonna go, right? Okay, so girlfriend's the beneficiary. They date for a while, have a real messy breakup. He almost immediately marries somebody else. They have 2 kids, married for 10 years, have a mortgage, he dies. Will leaves everything to his wife. Wife calls to collect the $350,000, and the insurance company says, I'm sorry, you're not the beneficiary, she is. Ex-wife, ex-girlfriend. Okay, and the wife says, well, hold on a minute, the will leaves everything to me. And they said, it doesn't matter. That's not something that passes through the will. And then the wife said, but we had a form, he filled out a form to change the beneficiary. And she found it in his desk, not filled out. So when I talk to your husbands at meetings, what I say to them is, when your wife gives you paperwork, fill it out. That's one of my takeaway lessons. But the other lesson is, maybe don't name your girlfriend as beneficiary, okay? But you gotta check those beneficiaries. Make sure you review those on any sort of transfer on death, accounts, or anything where you do a beneficiary, okay? Okay, we can skip some of this. Revise if big events happen, okay? I know that you can go online for like $39.99 and get a will. Don't do that, okay? Those are designed for like people who live in town with a house and a car. If you're involved in ag, you automatically have a complicated estate. You need a lawyer to write your will, okay? And I promise you, whatever the lawyer charges on the front end is cheaper than what it costs to probate an intestate will. And at least you have some say over where your assets go. The other way, you're gonna pay more money and the state decides where they go. Okay, so everybody needs to have a will. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, all right. Advanced Healthcare Directive. This is a form where you tell your doctor whether or not you want artificial life-sustaining measures. If you are diagnosed as terminal or irreversible. Y'all remember the Terry Schiavo case in Florida? Probably been 20 years ago. She's on life support. Husband wants to take her off. Parents want to leave her on. Huge lawsuit. It was national news. The judge had to decide. This tries to avoid that. Okay. And it's just an instruction to your doctor, says what you want. The cool part about this, there's a free fill in the blank form you can get here in Texas. If anybody needs it, I can email it to you. If you'll email me, you have my email address on the last slide, I'll send it to you. Fill in the blank, easy peasy. You can either get it notarized or signed by 2 witnesses. You're done. Okay. Do make sure you have this conversation with your family though, right? So they know what your wishes are before they end up in that situation. Okay. So Advanced Healthcare Directive, pretty simple. Medical power of attorney. This is, I'm going to appoint somebody to make medical decisions on my behalf in the event I can't make them for myself. Okay. I had to have a surgery a couple years ago. They got in there. There was a problem. A decision had to be made. I'm unconscious, right? So my husband's my medical power of attorney. He makes the decision. When I wake up, I'm back in charge. But while I'm incapacitated, he makes that decision. This is just that. We got a free form here as well. Fill in the blank. You can have it signed by 2 witnesses or notarized. Where this becomes super duper important. Let's say somebody is incapacitated for a long period of time, maybe a couple of weeks. The hospital eventually is going to make there be some sort of legal steps taken, and there's going to be 2 things they look for. Either the free form that you have filled out and executed, that's free, or they're going to make it a guardian be appointed, which is a whole rigmarole in the courts, going to cost you at least $7,000 to $10,000. Right? All while somebody's laying in the hospital and you need to be there. Don't do that. Free form, easy, avoid that guardianship situation later. Okay. And like I say, form available. Last one's a durable power of attorney. This is the same idea, but you appoint somebody to make business or financial decisions and actions on your behalf. Right? They can go buy feed at the feed store. They can move money at the bank, that kind of a thing. We got a free form for this one too.
This one does have to be notarized, so no witnesses here, okay? And you can decide, does it become effective when I sign it? Or only when I become incapacitated? You can make that decision. So for example, I got a cousin who lives overseas. I'm his durable power of attorney in the US. So if something needs signed here, I sign it. He made it effective immediately, not just when he was incapacitated. Okay, so you can make that decision there. It does end when somebody dies. So once somebody's dead, you can't use the power of attorney anymore. You got to get the letters testamentary from the court to be able to act. Okay, but again, a free fill in the blank form for this one as well. Yes,
And that part about signing now or when you're
Yeah.
incapacitated came into play a couple weeks ago with my mother. She's 90.
Mhm.
Her power of attorney was signed in 1996.
Mhm.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah.
When she was still capable of doing everything. So
Right.
we had to go through that
yes,
process real quickly.
yes, yes,
So that's really something you need to think about when you sign that, check that box.
yes. Yeah, think about when
Yeah.
you want that to come
Yeah.
into play. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Is that?
Yeah. Well, some people will say, well, I don't want to check it because I don't know if I trust them. Like, if you don't trust them, don't name them as your power of attorney, right? So there are some lawyers who always have people execute it, just be in effect now, and then you can use it if you need it. Some people do put the incapacitated box. Just think through that. The other thing is that when you're planning, especially if you've got aging parents or aging, think through, get this stuff done before it's too late. Because like I got a friend whose mom has Alzheimer's. She can't sign any of this now. It's too late. She's gonna have to get a guardian appointed because she's not of sound enough mind to execute a power of attorney. Had they acted 2 years ago, this isn't a problem, but they didn't know that, and now it's too late. So think through that. Okay, there are other documents you might need. A trust, that can be a really useful estate planning tool. Lots of people will run their business out of a trust. There are lots of useful things there. I am not a lawyer who thinks that everybody has to have a trust. Some really push that everybody needs one. I don't think that's true. I think they can be useful in certain situations. I just make sure if a lawyer's selling you a trust, make sure that you understand why you need it, not just that everybody should have one. Okay. Out of hospital DNRs, that's going to be like I had an aunt on hospice one time, and she did not want any medical intervention, right? When it was time, it was time. She had it taped to the front door, man. She wasn't playing. Like nobody was coming in there to give her CPR, you know. That's a form if you want that. If you've got people who are dependents, whether that's an adult with special needs or a minor, got to make sure you've got provisions for that. They need a trust and they need a guardian appointed if something happens to you. Lots of times that happens in a will, but just make sure that that's taken care of. Another thing I don't have up here, but that might be useful to folks is what's called a transfer on death deed. Same idea as a transfer on death bank account, but you can do it for property. So again, for most ag operations, I probably wouldn't recommend that because we own so much property. It's so much more complex and stuff. But like, I think about Martha had a house in town. We did that in a transfer on death deed. So what transfer on death deed does, you name who's going to get the house when you die. You file it in the deed records. When you die, again, no probate, no process, take the death certificate and bam, the people she designated own the house. Okay. Also, what's cool about it, it's always revocable. So if you get mad at your kids and you're like, you're not getting that house, take it back. Or if you want to sell the house, maybe you need to sell the house to pay for medical bills, sell the house, right? But that can be an easy way to transfer property. Again, for most ag operations, I would say maybe you need 20 transfer on death deeds for all the property. Maybe that's fine. Just work with a lawyer because it's just more complex than kind of that was really designed for.
If you do that, does it count as that estate figure on death?
It's still, yes, a transfer on death deed would still count toward your estate tax total because you still control it. Now, where a transfer on death deed can be useful, if you use a transfer on death deed and you're trying to spin down your assets for Medicaid, it doesn't count. So that can be it could be a Medicaid tool, but for the estate tax, it still counts. Yep. Okay. Almost always the wrong estate plan is leaving the property to the kids in undivided interest. People get mad at me. This is a hill I will die on. So let's talk through it. Okay. Grandparents galore think it's the best idea that we're going to leave the farm to all 4 kids in undivided interest, right? Like joint owners for the 4 kids. Let me walk you through some problems, okay? Problem number one is the odds of all four of those kids getting along super well, never usually very high, okay? And you wanna know what's not gonna help them get along better? You being dead and then being forced to be business partners, right? That doesn't work. Lots of times, mom's the glue that holds everything together. And mom dies and it all really goes to crap, right? So that can be problematic. The big concern for me from a legal perspective with undivided interest is this. In Texas, if you own an undivided interest in property, you have the right to file for partition. What partition means is basically you say, okay, I don't want to be a 1/4 owner of the whole anymore. I want to divvy this up into 4 pieces and I want to own my quarter. This is mine, right? This so got 100 acres. This 25 acres is mine. If the kids can't all agree on how to draw those lines, it can be a forced partition. You go to the court. The court's going to appoint an appraiser to draw the lines. If they can't draw equal lines, which happens a lot, because how do you, I mean, there's no property you can divide perfectly into fourths, right, that are in the same, maybe there's some, but very, very often that doesn't work. If it doesn't work, the court's gonna order the sale of the property. Right? And now that property is gonna be sold. So let's say, happens all the time, we got one kid that came home to help with the farm. The other 3 kids live in town. One of them files for partition. Now the farm is for sale where this kid has lived forever. His family's being raised. He's put all his time and effort and sweat equity into it. They filed for partition. Now this kid's going to have to figure out how to buy that farm back again. Most farms barely pay for themselves once, much less twice, right? And if he doesn't buy it back, we may have somebody else come in and buy it out from under him, right? Just really think about it. I guess I wouldn't say it's always wrong. Maybe you've got a unique situation where it works. If you're going to do undivided interest, I'd really think hard about if that's the right move. There are other things you can do. You can put it in a trust for the benefit of all 4 kids, right? If you want to treat those kids equally and keep them kind of involved, a trust could be an option. An LLC could be an option. Stick that farm in an LLC. They can all be members of the LLC, but you can put some provisions in there about like what happens if somebody's going to leave, right? The other people get first shot at buying their interest at a discounted rate, maybe. What happens if somebody gets divorced? You can deal with that in an LLC. We can devalue your shares, or we can make sure she doesn't get it, or he doesn't get it, vice versa, right? But there are ways to do it. Just really talk to your lawyer about if you're going to use an undivided interest, if that's the right plan. Okay, any questions on that? Okay. Okay, easements. This one's a big deal. We talked about this at PCG today. I think it's important. We're talking about access easements here, right? So let's say one person has to cross the land of another person to get to their property, okay? An access easement happens all the time. The problem is a lot of them are in writing and they're not recorded in the deed records. And if they're not in writing and they're not recorded in the deed records, they don't really exist from a legal perspective. So let's say I own a piece of property here and Christy owns the piece of property in front of me. Forever, Christy just lets me cross her land to get to mine, but there's nothing formal. We didn't write it down. We didn't record anything. Christy and I are just friends. Well, what happens when Christy sells her land to somebody from California? They're always from California. Christy sells that land to the Californians, and now they say you can't cross anymore. How am I going to get to my property? Okay, first thing I want to tell you is the idea that this floats around. People will say, well, property cannot be landlocked in Texas. Somebody has to give you access. Completely false. Property absolutely can be landlocked in Texas. And if you can't prove legal access, you can't get to that property. Which means A, you can't use it because you can't get to it. B, you can't borrow against it because there's no company or no business lender is going to lend on collateral that doesn't have legal access. Hard to sell it because nobody can get title insurance on it without legal access, right? And so it limits you to a very limited pool of buyers. Who are the potential buyers?
Your neighbors.
The neighbors who are touching it. And what are they going to think that market value should be?
Not much.
Very low because they're your only buyer, right? So it's a big problem and it happens all the time. So I would just say if you've got easements,
make sure, get them in writing. Do it now. If you have to go to the neighbor and pay them to grant you that written easement, pay them. If it's less than what you'd spend on a lawyer going to court to try to fight about it, you're better off, okay? There are ways, I'm not gonna walk through all of these, there are ways in the slides you've got, to prove legal access. Lots of different types of easements, like I said, we're not gonna go through all these. Just know, like, on any of these where you can have to prove it, you have to go to court. You have to hire a lawyer, file a lawsuit, and then you have to be able to prove each of the elements to get that access. Let's just talk about easement by necessity as an example, okay? So let's say we got our property, me, Christy sells, they're kicking me out, okay? If they won't sell me an easement, they keep me off, I can try to prove an easement by necessity. Here's what I would have to show. The first thing is I'd have to show that my property and Christie's property at one point were owned by the same person. If they never were, there's no easement by necessity. That's out the window, okay? Second thing I have to prove is claimed access is a necessity and not just convenience. That's easy, that's not usually a problem. But the third thing is I have to show that that necessity existed at the time the two properties were severed. Not a problem if they were severed in 2000. Had a guy call the other day, the properties were severed in 1938. What witness are we gonna call who knows in 1938 that grandpa crossed this other property? They don't exist. Right? There was no way he could prove an easement by necessity. He was out of luck. Right? So I can't tell you enough. Get those easements written and recorded. Super important thing to get done. Okay, we're gonna skip the rest of these just for sake of time. I've got a couple of articles and a podcast and stuff on them. Okay, briefly on a couple of hot topics, and then I'll take any questions on anything. I want to talk about this case. It's called Cactus Water Services versus COG Operating. This is pending at the Texas Supreme Court. Probably one of the most important landowner cases in Texas, maybe ever. Here's the question. So when you have oil and gas operators that go out and they drill a well, right, when they start pulling oil out of the ground, it's not just oil that comes up. Other stuff comes up with it, including water, right? And that water has like stuff in it. I'm very scientific. Stuff in it. Sediment, salt, other types of elements are in this water. It's nasty, okay? They have to separate the water. It's called produced water. They separate the produced water off from the oil stream, take the oil over to sell it. Then they just produce water. Forever, the oil companies have had to deal with disposing of this produced water. We can't just run it out on the ground because it's all salty and nasty and kill everything, right? So a lot of times they'll truck it off to a disposal site and they'll dispose of it way underneath the ground. Sometimes there's disposal wells on the same lease. And they pay billions of dollars to dispose of this water. Well, fairly recently, a new technology developed that lets them treat the produced water and use it again in oil and gas operations. From a like natural resource conservation perspective, fantastic, right? Thank goodness. Let's quit using our good groundwater when we can reuse this. It's great. But it led to a huge question. Who owns that produced water? Because now that there's a market for it, we got to fight. Okay. So in this case, what we have is a 37,000 acre ranch in Reeves County. COG Operating has the mineral lease. They're the ones sucking the oil out of the ground, okay? The surface owner has leased all the groundwater rights to a company called Cactus Water Services. So surface owner leases groundwater rights and the lease says this includes produced water. So Cactus shows up and they're like, we're going to collect our produced water from you, oil and gas company. And the oil and gas company says, it's not your produced water, that's our water. This has never been answered in Texas law, never been a fight before because it wasn't worth anything. But now the question is, who owns produced water? Is it the oil and gas operator who extracted it from the ground? Or is it the surface owner who under Texas law owns the groundwater? Okay, fascinating question. The trial court and the Court of Appeals both said it's owned by the oil and gas operator. They've appealed to the Texas Supreme Court. Lots of ag groups, cattle raisers and Texas Farm Bureau wrote amicus briefs in support of the surface owner, saying the court got this wrong. This is wrong. It needs to be fixed. The Texas Supreme Court has taken the case. They heard oral argument last week. We'll see what they rule, okay? But again, from a private property rights standpoint, this is huge, because we know landowners own the groundwater, but what if we don't own that produced water? That's scary to me. Also scary though, what if we do own it? Do you think about why this is concerning? We do. What do we do? Right? What if we got oil and gas? Mind you, a lot of times the surface owner is not the person leasing the oil and gas, right? We don't own the minerals under our property. What are we gonna do when the oil and gas company says, okay, we have all these barrels of produced water. What are you gonna do with it? You need to pay to dispose of it. If it spills, is it my liability? I don't know how any of that shakes out. I think it's super interesting and also terrifying.
Yeah.
Right? I think, other questions come up to me. What about, y'all have heard about this lithium mining that's happening in East Texas? Where they're like extracting water and they're pulling lithium out of it to make batteries? Who owns that? What if there's lithium in the produced water? Who owns that? I don't know. What about all the produced water that has already been sucked up out of the ground and disposed back in the ground? Who owns that? I have no idea. There's tons of questions. I think it's fascinating. We'll see what the Supreme Court does, but lots of implications there.
Like your leaseholder in that case, like on your disposals and stuff, because I mean, it's back at that location now, so.
It's back at that location, right? But, you know, it's not gonna stay, it doesn't stay under that one property. So what if
Right.
it migrates over and now it's under your property?
Right, but then you'd be responsible for getting it out if you want to do anything with it. So
Yeah, maybe.
it's crazy.
It's crazy to think about all the unknown questions with that. So I think that case is really interesting. Property tax deadlines are coming up. We talked about this just a little bit, but remember, if you're gonna, if you wanna have your ag use or open space or wildlife management exemptions, the deadline for filing for those is, April the 30th. If you had it last year, you're good to go unless they contact you, okay? If you bought property since last April, or if you've inherited property, those exemptions do not automatically carry over. You gotta go fill out that paperwork again. Don't miss that. I get a call every October, somebody will call me like, oh my gosh, we don't have our ag exemption anymore. That's been a sorghum field for 200 years and we just bought it. Yeah, but you bought it and that changed it. You have to go fill that paperwork out again. So don't miss that. And then like we talked about earlier, property tax protest, that's coming up too.
I have a question on
Yeah.
that. My husband's mom passed away in January,
Yes.
so that her land is still in her estate.
Yeah.
Will those tax exemptions?
I would go down and just make sure. I would go down and say, tell them exactly that. Do we need to fill out any transfer paperwork or do we wait until it actually passes out of the estate to somebody else? They do whatever they say. But I would go ask that question just to make darn sure. Yeah. I think the answer is gonna be no, that the estate's gonna be fine, but just make sure.
Okay.
Protest deadline, we talked about this before, but remember, you don't get your tax bill until October. If you're mad in October, it's too late to be mad. You gotta appeal, protest those values now. Okay, I think the deadline is like May the 15th or 30 days after they send you your notice. So don't miss that deadline. Corporate Transparency Act, I'm so sick of this stupid law. If you've been following, it was like on and off and on and off, and who freaking knows? It's off now. Okay, corporate transparency is out the window. They've made a new rule that it only is going to apply to foreign entities. So all of our LLCs, we don't have to report anymore.
So what if you're one of those ones?
I know, I was too, Sheila.
You know,
Did what they
December
said.
26th.
I know, did what they said. They had your info, we're not getting it back. Yeah, it's frustrating. That whole thing was frustrating. Yeah, Garrett and I have had many a conversation because it was like, we look like dum-dums to our clients, right?
Right.
Because on the 23rd of December, we're like, nobody report, it's off.
Yeah.
On the 27th, we're like, everybody report. I'm sure they're like, what weird is like losing her mind. So that was a mess. USDA announced their new emergency aid program. Y'all probably saw that. There's gonna be emergency aid for like financial disasters, like with price disasters, and then also natural disasters. It's all gonna be paid through a new program called ECAP. Gonna see signups for that and payments being generated through the FSA office, so keep an eye on that. We're gonna push it out quick. I don't know if I haven't seen the exact deadline, but it's coming. It's coming fast. Okay, the last thing I'm gonna mention is have y'all followed this in Johnson County, which is like Cleburne, where there's all this PFAS contamination on the property?
So PFAS is like that forever chemical that like never goes away, never dissolves. It's like real bad environmentally. There's some farms and ranches in Johnson County that found PFAS contamination on their land, their soil, their water, their animals. They've got animals dying. It's a disaster. And they claim the lawsuit that they filed said that was due to biosolid fertilizer sold by Sinagro that their neighbor bought and stored on their property. And they say it like ran off and seeped into the stuff, and now everything's contaminated. And they have filed a lawsuit against Sinagro. The county has declared a state of emergency. The county has like an environmental investigator who said it was, yeah, it's from this fertilizer. Last week, Sinagro released their own study. They hired an independent firm and a professor at Purdue to study all this. They said there's no way that PFAS contamination came from its fertilizer. Which if that's not the case, I think is still super concerning because where is it coming from, right? Anyway, big lawsuit, big back and forth, scary situation there.
So related to earlier in the day, what about the farmer that bought the fertilizer that was doing it?
What about, yeah, they didn't sue him. They did not sue him. We talked about deep pockets, right? Sinagro has deeper pockets. They also sued the EPA and said EPA should be regulating this,
Okay.
and they did. So, but could that farmer be sued? Absolutely. Absolutely, they could sue for negligent storage, negligent, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, the last thing, I'll wrap up with this, and like I said, I'll take any questions. I always end with this, especially when we talk about things like estate planning and that flight plan and all this stuff we need to go do. Keep in mind the why it's worth doing this, right? And so for us, these are my kids. Forever ago, they're big now. If we take the time to do this right on our place, those kids are the fourth generation, right? Their kids will leave it big. So this picture here in the middle, we still have a couple places where we irrigate out of a concrete ditch with siphon tubes. If y'all don't think I know what work is, this is an easy job, okay? But my dad there taught me to irrigate in that field, and a few summers ago, he taught my little boy to do the same thing. It's worth a lot of hassle to me if I can make sure this keeps happening. So that's my encouragement to you. As you go through some of this, as you go through the financial planning and the estate planning and all that, remember the why behind it, because that's really important. Okay, the last thing I'll say, and I've added this as a slide on every presentation I do. I've got a real heart for mental health issues, particularly with agriculture. My own family has faced some mental health struggles. And last year I lost a very dear family friend. I went to his funeral. He died by suicide. And he raised cattle his whole life, one of my favorite people in the world, and he took his own life. When that happened, I decided I'm putting information about this in every presentation. Everybody's going to listen to it. And if I can help one person, I'm going to call that a win. And so I want to tell you about what we've got. Through Extension, we partnered with the Texas A&M Telehealth Institute, and we have set up a counselor who has an ag background. She will offer counseling services on the phone or iPad. We'll mail an iPad to somebody. To anybody involved in agriculture in Texas or their family members. It's free. There's no insurance requirement. You don't need a diagnosis. None of that, none of the hoops. All you have to do is call this number. They're going to ask you, are you from Texas? Are you involved in ag or a family member of somebody involved in ag? If the answer is yes, you're in. So y'all just remember that we do have this resource. If it's something that can help you, great. If it can help your neighbors, great. And that is the one encouragement I give you is watch out for each other, right? I mean, the good and bad of a small town, right, is we all know everybody's business entirely too much. We can see when something's wrong. We can see when something's not right. Reach out to people, ask people. It literally might save somebody's life. Okay. So the last thing, this is my business card. You've got your slides. If y'all have questions after today, if you need help finding those forms, if something else comes up, feel free to reach out anytime. I'm happy to help with whatever I can. Okay. With that, we have exactly 20 minutes for questions. I told you I'd do 20 minutes. Okay. And like I said, we can talk about any topic. If y'all have something we didn't cover, you want to talk about, go for it. I scared them off.
Yeah.
I'll start, I guess.
Yeah.
We have very minimal estate plans at this point in time, which we have very small children, have not reevaluated since that's all happened.
Yes.
the lawyer we talked to was pushing to put everything in a trust, absolutely everything. And what is the benefit, I guess, of a trust, no trust, some things in the trust, not in the trust kind of?
Yeah, yeah. So there are benefits to a trust, right? So anything you put in that trust, right, is going to, you essentially set up a separate ownership for that. You don't own anything anymore. The trust owns everything. And if you operate out of the trust, there are some protections there. Liability protections is one example, right? So let's say that everything is owned by the trust, and somebody sues you personally. Those trust assets, they can't get to. You don't own those, right? So there's some liability protection there. Another thing, creditor protection, right? If somebody tries to come after you for a judgment or something against you personally, trust assets protected. So that can be a benefit there. Another place that can be a benefit from an estate planning perspective is sometimes people will set up a trust and it's like a marital trust where it's like, you know, everything is in here and mom and dad are the trustee and the beneficiary, right? We make the calls, we spend the money, good to go. Let's say that mom dies first. How many times y'all see mom die first and what does dad do?
Find a new one.
New wife immediately. I think it's because they can't cook for themselves. That's why. Right? And so what sometimes will happen in that scenario, right? Mom dies first, left everything to dad in the will. We don't have a trust, left everything to dad in the will. Well, now dad marries her and maybe he makes a new will, leaves everything to his wife. Dad dies, that wife and the kids get everything. Your kids are out, right? A trust can be set up to help avoid that, and at least the part of the first spouse to die, their part of that trust, you can protect and make sure it goes to your kids. Some people will use that way as a tool. Again, I don't know that everybody needs a trust. I think it can be a good tool for some things. Other options, you can see people use LLCs. Those can be good tools. Frankly, Garrett Couch is as good as it gets on that kind of stuff.
That's on the list, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Garrett Couch, Amber Miller is another lawyer in Lubbock who's really good at this kind of stuff. I talked to them. And another thing is they'll shoot you straight.
Yeah.
Some lawyers want to set up a living trust, and I've heard lawyers say, living trust, send all your money to us, right?
Oh my God.
You just want to make sure that's not the.
That's the impression that I got too, because I mean, we have multiple LLCs, is what I would tell you, and to put the majority of LLCs into one trust. was very-
I would sure want an explanation of why that was needed, because that may just be an extra layer of send your money to us.
What recommendations did you go?
Yeah, so from a estate planning perspective or business entities, Garrett Couts is in Lubbock, Couts. And Amber Miller. Also in Lubbock, yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You have a lawyer for taxes.
Talk to me
So it's for my husband, he's a farmer in Lubbock, and he worked for somebody, I'm not gonna say who, because it's a small town, everybody knows.
for sure.
He was taking taxes out, didn't turn it in, filed bankruptcy.
Oh, so it's like an employment law, it's really an employment law.
Well, this is the problem, is he's now hiding. We can't get a W-2. They're like, you need a lawyer, and we're like, okay, so we went to the bankruptcy, they can't do his bankruptcy because it's so dirty, they had to get a new bankruptcy lawyer, and so we're like, what do we do?
What do
We
we
can't file taxes. So I'm like,
Email me, let me see if I can find somebody who can help. I
Okay.
don't know off the top of my head, but email me and just say, the person, we gotta track down the W-2, I'll see if I can't find somebody.
like, we have like our tax lady, she's like, we can't, what?
CPA, that's probably, you probably are gonna have to.
Oh, yeah, we have that, and then we have his that they can't get hold of him, and we're like, what do we do?
What do we do? Email me and we'll see if we can find somebody. Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so I have a really good friend, she's a school teacher, husband was a drilling consultant,
Mhm.
making tons of money. But he passed away at the rig, he tried to do lawsuit with that, didn't go through. But she has found out that he owed back taxes and they had a lien on the house. It is his taxes, not hers. Could she develop a trust and sell the house to the trust, pay off?
Probably not now, since the lien's already on the house.
Okay.
So two problems there. One of the problems, like I said, the lien's already on the house. If you were to sell that the house, deed the house to the trust, the lien goes with it, because the
Okay.
lien's already in place. That's problem number one. Problem number two is, even if it's a debt like that was his back taxes, in Texas, because of community property, if that happened during the time of the marriage, it's probably also a community debt. And so that's probably gonna be a hard sell. The trust wouldn't help her in this.
And then going forward, of course, he had not filed taxes from the year that he passed.
Mhm.
And so that's I think it's a $60,000 tax bill. Because he made quite a bit of money.
Right, and she said, ugh.
Yeah, so would she owe those taxes since he is deceased?
Potentially, and there could be different like rules about when, I think we could depend on when he died and things like that. She's gonna find a really good CPA. She needs a good CPA to help her walk through what she actually owes. And I'd make real sure I knew exactly and look for any like exceptions or things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, ugh.
I know.
Sick for her.
And we'll get that at the time.
Yeah. Okay, well, if anybody has other questions that they don't want to ask out in front of the group, I'll hang out for a few minutes. Also, okay, if you come up with something later, if you go home and something else comes up, reach out to me. I'm sure glad to help with any resources or information we can get you. Okay.
I have another.
Yeah.
So my granddad has dementia. My grandmother does not, but they do not have food in order. And it's gonna be a fact. I mean, my mom, told all the things. Is there a way to make it, he can't sign anything. So how do we make it to where she can sign and it works? But the problem is everything has always been there together. Each kid, if this one got $50, this one got $50.
Yeah.
How do we fix it? How do
Yeah.
we-
Probably there's not much you can do. Grandpa is to the point where he.
Oh, no, he's gone.
Yeah. In that
It's
scenario,
Christmas today.
in that
No.
scenario, there's nothing you can do. Probably you have to get a guardian appointed. You could get grandma appointed as a guardian for him. It's expensive. But if she was the guardian, then she could act on everything. Now, she certainly could deal with her half of the community assets.
Her
right?
stuff is great.
And does she have the powers of attorney and will? and all
Yeah,
that?
'cause she had a
But he doesn't have
problem,
any.
yeah, because he now has cancer. So we have to have a power of attorney for him,
Right.
because he never had one.
And he can't do one.
He can execute one. So my mom is my grandmother's power of attorney.
Mhm.
She had surgery and she's a DNR. Let me tell you, he about died when I heard that. But he doesn't have anything. So what do we do?
Yeah, the only option there probably is to get a guardian appointed because if he can't execute himself, there's nothing else you can do. Yeah.
He is, like I said, it's Christmas Day. He's one of my relationship.
Yeah, probably a guardian is the only option. That makes sense. I'm so much good information.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
I have a question.
Yeah.
We have a small community that has a Lions Club that hunt every year. The farmers, donate their land. The hunters sign releases when they come to the Lions Club. Should our farmers be worried about,
Yes,
I mean, how do we,
Yeah, they should
ensure
have-
that nobody is sued
Right.
for
Yeah, the regular, there's kind of 3 steps they can take. The first one is that release, they need to make sure that they're signing it not only to release the Lions Club, but also to release the landowner.
landowners?
To name the landowners. Make sure in that release, it includes that Agritourism Act language.
Okay.
Okay, that needs to be in the release, 10-point bold font in the release, okay? And then also, I would hang up the Agritourism Act signs at every ranch that they're gonna go to. Okay, and so now you should have the recreational use statute protection, you've got the signs, you've got the waiver, you've kind of checked every box you can check from a protection standpoint. Now, again, doesn't mean they won't get sued, but
Right.
they've got lots of good defenses if something happens. Yeah, I wouldn't lose sleep if I had done those things.
So like they usually post signs that like on a fence post that this is included in the hunt, so then they can also.
Just put that sign right under it, yes, the Agritourism Act sign right under it, yep.
Yeah, Christine, you'll do most for field days.
Oh, yeah, for field days.
Field day, the Agritourism Act sign, yes.
Taking care of us, fine, everybody just put them all, line them all up.
Carry them around.
If you need any of these, don't think about it.
All the time, and set it at each location, if it has to be there, it
Yeah.
has to.
It's a good question.
Yeah, if I was gonna let somebody come to a field day, we would have.
Be like, sign this waiver before you say that you're calling.
I love your podcast.
Oh, thanks.
All the time.
Good, thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Fantastic. Any more questions? She said she'll stick around
I'll
for
stick
a
around
little
for the
bit.
day.
Feel free to catch her if you have any questions, and if not, we will meet next Tuesday. We've only got